I think you only realize yourself when you're put in an entirely new environment. When you're at a certain environment for your whole life, you're not sure if it's the environment or you that defines who you are. But I think once you throw yourself into an entirely new place, you discover yourself interacting with people a certain way that you didn't know you could. Then I think you learn something about yourself.
Shout out to Grace, because that is really the reason why we first connected. During my, I guess it was first or second week in Seoul, Grace was hosting an event in kind of collaboration with you and EO Studio as well. And even like before I came to Seoul, I had wanted to find as many young, interesting people with cool backgrounds that were in like the startup ecosystem. And I was a little bit worried that it would be hard to find some of those people. But you and I connected. I connected with some of your colleagues as well. And it was like a great start to my career journey. So maybe as a starting point, could you just share a little bit about like who you are? And then I'll ask some questions in terms of your background and all of that fun stuff as well.
All right, then should I just say hi?
Yeah.
All right, hi, I'm Hannah. I work at EO Studio as a project manager. I help. So EO Studio, we're a startup media company that features startup founders and also investors, mostly on their personal journey to growth. So we cover their personal stories of how they came to be, how they succeeded, how they failed, and we make that into a bite-sized content and usually upload it to our YouTube channels, and it's been growing very fast. So I've been at the company for about 3 years because I'm very passionate about startup founders as well. And that's how I got to know Grace as well. And then I'm excited to be sitting here talking to you.
Yeah. In terms of like the startup ecosystem in Korea in general, like you have been at EO for like 3 years now,
Yep.
right? Have you seen a lot of change in development? Like, and even I guess before you started working at EO, were you interested in the startup ecosystem within Seoul, and did you know much about it?
Right, so I don't think I knew anything about the startup ecosystem in Seoul, but I just became interested in the idea of a startup when I was in my first year college in Northeastern University, which is in the States. So I spent a bit about me is I graduated from an American prep school, high school, and then went on to university there. And then after just a semester, I actually quit and then came back to Korea to re-enter university here. But during my first semester at Northeastern, I took this course called Global Social Entrepreneurship. And it was a seminar course that teaches you about how business can be made for good. And then I was learning about all these things. We were reading a book every single week, and we had to write an essay every single week. It was a very hardcore class. But then it kind of opened my eyes to think that I thought business people were like these greedy, mean people. My very childish self thought so. So I never thought that I would want to be an entrepreneur. But that course really opened my eyes to what a startup can do with its power. So I was interested in that idea of a startup, and one of the first things I seeked out when I came back to Korea for university was to find student clubs that had more to do with startups, so more like entrepreneurial clubs.
Yep.
So I entered a club like that where we would do projects and kind of do it like a startup. We would try to do build things, diagnose a problem, and try to come up with a solution, try to create business out of it.
Yep.
And that was really fun. So I joined EO as a kind of continuation of that interest in what a startup life is. And only since then have I really learned the ecosystem. And I don't think I quite can say that I know it well or have experienced it enough.
Yeah.
But I think it's all through what I've experienced at EO that I kind of have a lens on the ecosystem here.
That makes sense. Even your, I guess, pre-college journey as well is pretty unorthodox in terms of your background. But you had mentioned that you did, it was just like one semester at Northeastern, and then you came back to Korea. Can you tell a little bit about like why you decided to do that? And even before like going into Northeastern, what your mindset or plans were?
Right. So The first time I started studying abroad was when I was 11. So I was born in Korea. I was born and raised here in Seoul until I was 11 years old, and then I started living abroad in Canada, Vancouver, Canada, and I lived there for 2.5 years with different homestay families all throughout. So I would move from one household to another, and it would all be these Canadian families that you had never met before, and they had very different backgrounds. So some of them would be a French family, and then one of them would be just a very old couple where all of their kids were grown up, so they had no kids in the house. Another house, they had 4 kids and 3 dogs, and families coming over all the time. So it was a very different household I got to live with for at least 6 to 7 months each. And that was really fun because I'm an only child and I never lived in that kind of a dynamic environment before. But also it was troublesome, and because it meant a lot of things had to change in my environment, and of course I'm a kid, so I'm without my parents. But but I still kind of liked the education that I was getting. I liked going to school in Canada. I liked taking all these courses that challenged me to think differently instead of just memorize, which is how you're usually taught in Korea. So I decided to pursue studying abroad, and that's why I went to the prep school in the States and lived in a dormitory with a bunch of girls. And then I think since then on, I always thought I would live abroad for the rest of my life because I just couldn't imagine going back to a country that I left when I was 11, right?
Yeah.
So I guess I kind of even forgot that I was a Korean or an Asian, because unless you take a photo and take a look back, you're just surrounded by a bunch of white people. And then you just kind of forget everything about that. But then when I went to university at Northeastern, that was a very disillusioning sort of experience for me because prep school was very safe. It was very small, and our teachers loved us. They took care of us like we were their children. But going into university, suddenly it's a much bigger city that I'm living in. I'm not living in a nice dormitory anymore. There's no dorm parents. So, and then suddenly I realized, oh, I'm a foreigner. I wanted to make money. I wanted to like have a part-time job because I thought that's what all kids do when they go to college, but I couldn't with my F1 visa. So it's illegal if you work part-time as a student in the States. So just like learning these little things that I thought was going to be obvious, and realizing that, oh wow, I'm a foreigner in this country, and even if I graduate from college, it's not going to be the same for me as for my other friends who are going to go on with their lives and get a job here. It's not going to be the same for me. I'm going to have to apply for a visa. I'm going to have to go through all those paperwork, and that kind of felt alienating. It wasn't something I thought was going to be. And then that's also when and then it was frustrating because as I mentioned, the entrepreneurship course that I was taking was so fun, and I was having so much fun taking these courses, and to think that, oh, despite all of this education I'll be getting, I still have to work extra to stay here. And do I have to? I would like think about that. Yeah. And then that's also when my parents, our family had a tough time during those days. So it was kind of getting difficult to fund me studying abroad by then. So I thought, let's take a step back and take a leap year and then kind of spend 1 year in Korea, not go to school, and just try to rest it out because we couldn't fund the next semester. And then when I was back in Korea, I found this group of Korean students studying abroad, but they would convene every once in a year in Korea because they're home for the holidays and they have nothing to do. They have no friends here. So we would just kind of meet together and we would plan these volunteering trips where we would go to remote parts of Korea and have an English camp for a week or two and teach English to the little kids at these organizations and have fun with them. We would just plan different activities, and I had so much fun with the Korean kids, Korean students, and also the kids that whole experience of not being a foreigner was very welcoming to me. And that's when I realized I could have a future in Korea. I could make some friends here. I could have a lot of fun doing things here too. So it kind of opened my eyes to a different kind of way I could pursue my education. So I decided to drop out of Northeastern and start reapplying to colleges here.
And that Korean like English kind of camp, or like that group of people that were gathering together, were the teachers, so to speak, like you and the other like Korean students at various colleges, were they Koreans who like would go to school abroad and then came back to teach this English class? Or what were the profiles of most of those like teachers?
Right. So it was very diverse. So the founding members were mostly actual elementary school teachers in Korea, but they had had experience living abroad before, so they spoke very good English, and they had all these friends from back when they were studying in London, back when they were studying in Australia. They would have these other Korean friends too. So they kind of, but then the founding members had been elementary school teachers in Korea. So that's also a very interesting background. But for them, a way for them to bridge their network of friends abroad with the wonderful kids in Korea was to plan this little camp where we could convene and have fun together. So that's when how they started, and it expanded more. So I was at this organization for 4 years after joining for the first time, because it was such a crucial thing for my identity at that time, finding friends who were like me. Because a lot of them were kids who were studying in different parts of the world, coming to Seoul solely for summer break or winter break. We didn't have a permanent stay here. We didn't have permanent friends here. So we connected through that lack of connection. But then there were also, it was very diverse. So like some of us had just started living in the States for his college year. So he was actually finding it much more difficult in the States. And when we came here, it felt like home for him. For me, it was an exotic experience because I had spent most of my life abroad at that time. And then here, this was an exotic experience. So,
And I had mentioned this to you, I think the second time we had chatted, which is in terms of like potentially building a community for the Korean diaspora and helping I guess just bring everybody together and having a centralized network. I guess this program is like one example of something that helped other people like yourself, right? But are there a lot of other things like that you have found? Or I guess like even when you were living in Canada or in the US, for example, was it easy for you to get plugged into communities and have kind of a support network? Or do you feel like there is any lack of that?
I feel like, I think I kind of brainwashed myself.
And just real quick, please.
Sorry.
Yeah. I just want to make sure everybody can hear you. Yeah.
I feel like I brainwashed myself when I first studying abroad, because I feel I had that feeling of being indebted to my parents because at a young age they are spending a lot of money to be sending me abroad. And so this is a kind of opportunity or privilege that not everyone gets to have. So I felt that I really needed to own up to it and really perform well so that the money is not spent for nothing. So I kind of intentionally didn't try to make Korean friends or speak Korean whenever. I would try to forget about all of that because sense. I felt that and also because I thought I had finite amount of time. I thought I was only gonna be living in the first few years of living in Canada. I thought I was only there for a few years and then would go back to Korea. That's what I thought I would do. So, I only have 1 year to master English, and so I would kind of not talk to any Koreans in any situations. I I would sometimes pretend that I don't speak Korean. When even if there was a Korean person in front of me, I would pretend that I don't speak Korean so that that person doesn't talk to me in Korean. It was weird, but
for an 11, 12-year-old, that is a very impressive thing to be doing.
I guess so. It was, I don't know. I brainwashed myself. I was like, I am not. I am only speaking in English. And I was very bad at English. So I was mostly just silent. I wasn't talking anyway. And then, but that phase kind of passed, I think, during the Vancouver Olympics. I was in Vancouver.
Ah, wow.
And that was the year when Yeona Kim, who is the gold medalist figure skater, she's like a national star symbol.
Yeah.
And she won the gold medal in the figure skating. And that kind of changed how I view my country and how I describe myself to my friends at school, because Canada, they love skating. So it's a big thing for them. And so they would say, oh, Yeona Kim. They'd be so excited to talk to me about it. Like, aren't you Korean? And that's when I would start owning, yep, that's me. That's my Korean heritage. So I started being proud just around that corner. And then after I became comfortable in English, I kind of was able to move away from that feeling of indebtedness to not speak Korean. And after that, it kind of changed for me to be reaching out to other Koreans near me, and then I would, even if there was a public speaking contest that I had to do, I would talk about Korean culture in front of people. I would talk about our World Cup, how we love soccer, how we love food. I would talk about all of those things, even if no one cared, because I felt like that was a very interesting part about me that only I can talk about. So that there was that shift, but. Did I have a support system? I'm not sure. I guess in high school, when I was in prep school, our entire school, we had about 300 students. It was a very small prep school. And then and the entire school only had about 11 to 12 Koreans in total. So we would just kind of take care of each other because the older Koreans would kind of call you into the dormitory. They'd cook us ramen and then give us some kimchi. and then that was the only that was very good to have. And I guess that always kind of stuck throughout. But I guess I always had that feeling that, but I still need to have American friends. I still need to not be too attached to the Korean side if I'm going to succeed in the States, whatever the heck that is. That was sort of in my head the whole time.
I see. Well, and I ask partly because over the last, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 years, I have stumbled across these different like online learning communities. And I think like Graceling's Design Buddies community is one good example of this. I am not personally like involved with Design Buddies, but other communities like that exist. And so there are a handful of like investing communities where I have built relationships over time. And if those communities didn't exist, like I just, for one reason or another, maybe I wouldn't have had an urge to look out for something like that. But the fact that it did exist, I like really appreciated. And so I'm trying to assess whether or not like this community that I'm building is like something like that, or if it's just like there's a reason why it doesn't exist, and the reason why it doesn't exist is because people wouldn't find it like valuable. So that's where the kind of origination of the question came from. But it does seem like whether it's even that other organization that you described with like Korean students from maybe all over the world coming back to like teach this language course and finding connection through that, that there are value in those, types of communities.
There is one more though. When I was at Northeastern, it was just such a very quick semester, but there's so much there in there. When you think of Korean communities in colleges, I felt like the normal ones that we think of is like KISA or KASA, like Korean American Student Association, Korean International Student Association. The one I was in was KISA, and then it was Northeastern University KISA. And but there's so much more depth in that. So for Northeastern, there were 2 main divides of majors. Northeastern is very famous for their
pharmacy school.
Yeah, pharmacy school.
Sure.
And then they're very also famous for business school. So there were very two different divides as to the majors, and for each major they had a program of their own. So I was more interested in the business major, although I wasn't a business major when I was at Northeastern.
Okay.
But so I joined this Korean business academia in Northeastern University, which had about 20 people. And that was a really fun experience because we basically formed a group of 4 to 5, and then we would carry out a project. It wasn't that we would actually execute it, but we would kind of come up with business ideas and pitch it to each other and vote on which one was better. And then it was just like a very fun way to meet fellow Koreans in the university, especially because it's a very big university. You don't get to meet them as you would in a small prep school. So that was my very first interaction with older students.
And were they Korean natives, like born and raised in Korea types of backgrounds, or was it a diverse?
They were more international students.
Okay.
And that's the divide I also felt is there were both. There was Kasa and Kisa in the same university. So Korean Americans and Korean international students, the cultures were very different.
Right.
And therefore there would be different groups within the same university, even if you're under the Korean ethnicity branch. And then like each of them would have their own heads, and then they would like
would they communicate at all or not really?
Sometimes they would communicate, but
it was awkward.
Yeah.
yeah. It makes sense. Yeah. And I think maybe that's something that I'll probably encounter as well as when I have conversation with people, because there does seem to be a preferential division, which is like kind of unfortunate in some sense. But there are also people, I think, in both groups who have some curiosity about like, if you're a Korean American, you want to interact with some more like Koreans. And if you are a Korean, like I think there is a tendency for maybe people to stay in their own lane to some extent. But some people that I have met that have taken even like one semester or a couple of months abroad, it seems like they get very curious about people from different backgrounds. So that will be like one of the challenges or the opportunities is like meshing, getting the best of as many of those communities as possible. And in terms of like what you identify most as, because you were in Korea from 0 to 11 years old and then spent a lot of time abroad, like the mindset wise, do you associate more with one or the other?
I think I have felt both ends of the not maybe ends, but both sides of the spectrum, because up until I was in high school, I would resonate more with Korean Americans because I wasn't very comfortable in Korean back then, because I had kind of forgot a lot about it because how I didn't speak Korean. So I would intentionally not speak, so my language had deteriorated. And so I would feel much more comfortable being with Korean Americans than Korean international students. I actually found at that time, if I was interacting with Korean international students, sometimes they would know these K-pop trends or things that I didn't know about. And I was this girl, like, what? I wouldn't get it. So there was a very big difference as to the understanding. But as I went to college and so on, I've met much more international students. And my college in Korea too, I went to an international college within Yonsei University, which everything is taught in English. It's kind of like a liberal arts college within Korea. So a lot of my friends, peers, all had these similar backgrounds of having lived somewhat years abroad in different countries, and so we would interact a lot about that. But then at the end of the day, we're here in Seoul, so that would be kind of deduced as to more resonating with this Korean international students kind of sentiment. But I guess that's changed. But I get both sides, and I like both sides. And
And like even at those universities, like Yonsei, for example, do they all have like international schools, like most of the major universities? And like in terms of the demographics, is it pretty diverse, or is it mostly people of Korean ethnicity, whether they were like Koreans living abroad and then coming back?
I think, I don't have the statistics in my head, but just from the feel, I think there are about 20% of non-Korean ethnic students, maybe a bit more these days, but that's how I felt. And yeah, and even among the Koreans, there is a divide because I wouldn't say divide, but there is a difference in college entrance is very complicated in Korea, and you have to. And I graduated from a foreign high school, so I have a different application path than students who graduated from a Korean high school, and they actually have different quotas for each. So some say, oh, some schools are easier to get in if you're from a foreign high school. Some schools are easier to get in if you're from a Korean high school because the quota is already decided for you. So, but for my class, it was half and half in terms of foreign and non-foreign.
Okay.
Yeah.
I see. That makes sense. Yeah, it's cool that is even a thing that exists. In terms of like even going back to, I'm trying to think about my 11, 12-year-old self and just like deciding to live in another country. And I know that the original intent was not for it to be the rest of your teenage years in Canada. But why at 11 did you have any appetite or interest in going abroad? And what was the discussion like with your parents during that time?
So education fever in Korea is very high. So when you're a young kid, if your parents have expectations for you, they would send you to a lot of these cram schools after school to study English, study math. And you have no idea how many subjects you can study in one day, but they would just send you to all these places. But my mother was not one of those people. She was very specific that she would not send me to a cram school. So I spent most of my young childhood learning how to swim, how to play tennis, how to skate. She would make me read a bunch, and I would go to these art classes where I had fun creating things. So I had a very safe childhood from the academic stress that many Korean kids have.
Interesting.
Even while living in Korea. But there was a time when I also am competitive in some ways, right? So, but at a certain point in elementary school, I was realizing that, oh, I'm not stupid, but why is everyone speaking better English than me? Why is everyone smarter than me? Like, I thought I wasn't stupid.
Yeah.
So that kind of triggered something in me, thinking, oh, I want to make up for the lack of cram school.
Sure.
And there was a phase there was a time when it was a thing for mothers to send their kids abroad for 1 year. And then because they're young, they assume that you would pick up English really quickly when you're living abroad, and then you bring them back in and they speak perfect English, and then you send them off to middle school. So that was sort of
so that was a thing
that
then?
was a thing.
Like a lot of your peers had done something like that before?
I remember when I was in 3rd grade, 4th grade elementary school, my friends would disappear for about a year, and they'd come back in 5th grade, and then they'd be like speaking English. So it was a thing, but it wasn't a widespread thing, but it was a thing in Gangnam.
I see.
And so my mom, she didn't want to force me, but she just asked my opinion of what I thought. And for me, yes, for many reasons, but also Canada. Like, you would be living in a 2-story house with a nice lawn and grass, and there'd be dogs, and you'd be walking to school in this very nice neighborhood. That was sort of what I pictured of what Canada is. So I was like, yeah, let's do it. And then I assumed, oh, if you go, you just pick up English. That's great. I speak no English, and all my friends do, but I'm not stupid. I want to speak just like them. So I had that kind of urge. So I guess I flew over. And
Wow. That's crazy. Yeah, it's like kind of a vision of the American dream, but it's like the Canadian dream, even when you're like 10, 11 years old. Huh?
Yeah.
That's crazy. Well, in terms of like what the experience was like, because most people maybe go for a few months or a year and then come back. In terms of how the experience was, as you can remember it, like it must have been good or fruitful to you in some dimension, given that you decided to spend the rest of your teenage years in Canada. Can you kind of like explain some of those like initial months of how it was, what the hard parts were, and then like why you decided to stick around for so long?
Right.
Also, just a quick question: is it like a program that everybody goes through, or like does your mom like independently have to find somebody in Canada to like do this for them?
She could do that, but it was usually through these agencies that would. So yeah, it's kind of like a program, and there's this agency that has a base in Canada, and they would be our guardians, our legal guardians while we're there because our parents are not with us. So my mother would send me to the guardian. The guardian would be maybe like the teacher at this after school class that you go to. So even in Canada, when I go there after school, they would come and pick me up, and I would go to this after school which is what my guardian ran as her business, and they would teach me Korean math.
So so you were still exposed to a bunch of other Koreans at that.
Yeah, and that's why I was so intent on not speaking to them, because you were so exposed to just speaking Korean with them all the time. So I would not make friends with them.
Wow, that's a pretty intense program then, huh?
Yeah.
So you go to like a regular Canadian school system, and then afterwards you go to more school with the Koreans.
It's a crazy thing, but the reason why they do it is because the whole purpose is that you will be there to experience the life abroad, to pick up the language, but also come back to Korea so that you can advance with your education here. So but math in Canada is so much easier than the math you do in Korea. Just by the years, how they divide the curriculum, it's just a much more advanced year. So if you were just taking math courses in Canada in just the school, it wouldn't be prepping you right.
You come back and then now you're behind on math.
Exactly. So they would make you do math.
Wow.
So it was sufficing both of those standards while you're there. So after school, they would come and pick me up. They intentionally separated the students who were in the neighborhood to different elementary schools, so there's less Koreans in each division you're sent to, so that you don't have friends to talk to.
That makes sense.
And then so they would like do a tour, pick us all up, bring us to this after school. We would take about 4 hours of extra classes on math and English.
It's a lot. 4 hours.
Yeah, like it was reading, writing class, and then listening, speaking class, and then Korean math class. So we would do that. That was a community of our own too. It was a very nice experience, although it was very stressful because you have all these kids who are in the same situation as you. So I wouldn't speak to them, but I would still resonate with them a lot.
Yeah.
And then,
how many people were in those, like, for your guardian kind of after-school community?
30. I think around 30.
Okay. And is Canada, was it the primary destination in terms of a lot of your peers in Korea where they were going, or was there a lot in like the States as well and even other countries?
I think they do it a lot in Canada and Australia because probably the visa, and but I'm sure there are also in the States, but I wouldn't know for sure. But a lot of my friends did it in Canada and Australia.
Gotcha. That makes sense. Okay.
And then they would give us a ton of homework after all of those classes. So I would go home and I just have a lot of homework to do. So I eat dinner, I do homework until like 1 a.m. and I go to bed.
Wow.
And then I go to school the next day. So that was my daily life.
So you weren't even like escaping the education.
Exactly. It got even harder for me because I wasn't going to cram schools in Korea. It was a very big shift of being exposed to that kind of education fever that my mother kept me away from. So that was a big change, and of course that was hard, but I think I I think you only realize yourself when you're put in an entirely new environment. When you're at a certain environment for your whole life, you're not sure if it's the environment or you that defines who you are. But I think once you throw yourself into an entirely new place, you're meeting with a bunch of new people, and you discover yourself interacting with people a certain way that you didn't know you could. Then I think you learn something about yourself. And when I went to Canada and was spending those months there, what I discovered about myself was I'm a very bright person. So I thought it was just that I had really good friends and I had a great family. But so the first few months, because I spoke no English, my entire personality changed. I wouldn't know how to approach someone, and I just became a very silent person.
And you were pretty extroverted as a kid, like
as
a 10,
kid,
11-year-old?
Yes. I was always the class captain, running around, always helping out friends, and just
well, that kind of makes sense with your job now, right?
Yeah,
in terms of what you do. Yeah. That's awesome.
So that was a part of me that I thought, but it's you don't realize that about yourself. But once I go there, I got so depressed that I wasn't able to do any of that because I can't talk to new friends. I don't know how to say hi. So that was suppressed for a couple of months. But I studied very, very hard. So, I realized that student side of me too. I realized that I really I like the feeling of growing. I like the feeling of learning. So I focused a lot on it, and therefore I picked up English very quickly. And once I did, I saw this old self kind of emerging. And in British Columbia, where Vancouver is, the school system is that it's elementary school up until your 7th grade, and then you go to secondary school, which is from 8th grade to 12th grade. So there's no middle school. So I was there from 6th grade to 8th grade. So I was there for the whole of 7th grade, which is the oldest grade in the elementary school. And for 7th graders at that elementary school, they would make you do a bunch of these leadership roles to train you. So we would have to teach things to the 2nd graders and 3rd graders. And when I was doing that, I had so much fun.
Wow.
And I was making these kids dance with me and clap with me. And then I remember my elementary school teacher coming to me and say, "Hannah, you've come out of the shell." And then I was like, "No, this is just me." I'm just finally being able to realize it. And then I guess I learned that about myself and loved being like that there.
Wow. Okay. And well, so those leadership roles, like I guess you couldn't immediately be in those leadership roles once you got to Canada, right? Because you just couldn't speak the language. But then after a couple months, then you took on some responsibilities there.
Yeah.
Okay. And like the intention of the duration of like how long you were expected to stay in Canada and do this program, was it 6 months, or how long were you originally planning?
Originally it was supposed to be 6 months, but then I ended up extending that to 1 year. And then once again, and after 1 year, that was when the Vancouver Olympic happened. I was really feeling very proud of where I came from, and also just myself. Much more comfortable, and that's when I kind of thought, I don't know what I like about being abroad right now, but I think I like this feeling of being intellectually challenged in a class, because that was something that never happened in Korea. But that was probably because I was only 11 years old until then. They never intellectually challenge you when you're 11 years old. But I guess I liked that experience of writing essays, reading challenging books, and learning a new language. That whole experience, I felt at that time would only be available if I were out here. I was scared, to be honest, to go back to Korea, because my idea of what it is that you would be doing a rotation after rotation of schools. You would be forced to memorize things without having to understand them. That was my idea of what it was. And I was very scared to do that after having experienced such a fun, like conversation-oriented classes at school. So I decided to elongate that to another year. So I spent a whole of eighth grade in secondary school. So I graduated from that elementary school and then went on to eighth grade and kind of experienced that graduating from a school to another school. Some of your friends are with you, some of them are not. That whole experience, and then when I was at the secondary school, there were these seniors, and then you see these seniors going to colleges, and they're taking these IB courses, and they're taking IB art, IB English, and that all looked really fun. So, I don't want to miss out on this kind of higher education. So then I would talk to my mom, and then we would talk about continuing to study abroad, but maybe at a safer environment than a homestay, because there were many ups and downs of me having to switch homes because of guardians breaking the law and things. So we thought, okay, let's find a safer environment where you're in an actual institution, in a nice dormitory, and then let's send you to the States. So that's what we did.
Wow. And so then you were in the States for, was it 4 years?
Yes. So from 9th grade to 12th grade, the whole of high school.
Okay.
And then the one semester at Northeastern.
Interesting. But like even in deciding to extend a year, did you like your first few months, whether it was like 6 to 12 months, did you not get like homesick at all, or did you not have a yearning to be back in Korea? I'm surprised at the amount of like independence and ambition you had at like 10 or 11, even academically, to be like, I wanna stick around. Like it seems quite courageous.
I guess, I mean, of course I was homesick. I think I got over that very, very quickly. And, yeah, I mean, of course, I was a kid. And so I would be talking to my mom on the phone and I'd be crying. I have no friends and no one asks me anything. And I miss this and this and this.
Yeah.
And then what happened though was my mom would start crying, and then my mom would go, "I'm so sorry I sent you. Do you want to come back?" Like, she'd be sad.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, "No, don't be sad. I think I'm okay now. Stop crying."
So you couldn't be sad anymore in front of your mom.
Like, I said I would come. Like, it was my choice. Like, I said I would do it, and why I should owe no to it. And it was just more the feeling of the indebtedness I mentioned. It was just, I felt that like I only have this amount of time. And this was because the timing was horrible too, because it was 2009 that I went over. So that was financial crisis.
Right.
And Canada dollar was really, really expensive at the time. So I'm a kid, of course. I don't really understand everything that's going on, but I at least know that something is really going wrong in terms of how the economy. I know that things are not good, and that I know that my parents are spending a lot of money to be doing this.
Yep.
So I just had that pressure most of the time. And maybe it wasn't healthy, but then yeah.
I see. Yeah, that's a pretty wild situation. And your parents, like, they encouraged you after they heard that you wanted to stick around. Like, were they receptive to that, or did they also feel like, hey, you should maybe it's time to come home after 2, 3, 4 years or anything like that?
My mom was all for it. Like, do whatever you want.
Yeah.
And when I said I would go to a prep school, my dad was a little against it because. So my dad, he's a businessman who taught himself to do business and has been running his business for many years. But he has this side of him where he interacts with a lot of people who have been rich for their entire lives, and that kind of tends to be something that sometimes troubles him. So he thought that if I went to a prep school, that's not like a normal public school. It's where kids pay a lot of money to come to stay in dormitories. It's a very specific group of these privileged kids living in a dormitory. And he thought it might ruin me because maybe I'll be this very ungrateful
elitist type of person.
Yeah, maybe it will ruin me like that. He also felt that because although we could afford the education, we weren't from this like wealthy, well-off family.
Sure.
So he felt that I'd feel disconnected from my peers because and I did sometimes, because some of my peers in prep school, like, they are the kind of kids who could just buy a watch at at an airport. Duty free. Like, why do you need a watch?
I
So
see.
there was that disconnection. So my dad was a little against that part of the peer group that I was getting into, but it didn't have any like significant impact. So I guess we kind of dismissed it very quickly.
Okay. And even when before you started at the prep school, you had done like multiple rotations with different families in Canada. Is that right? And were those experiences overall, were they like good, or it just depended on the nature of the family and your dynamics there?
Yeah, I mean, each of the families as like their characteristics were so different, and so I think I'm lucky that I got to experience them all, but none of them really ended up as a happy ending. and I guess it just happened. So I don't know. Do you want to hear the stories of how I had to switch families?
Yeah. Tell me.
Interesting?
If you're open to sharing, I'd love to hear it. Yeah.
It was so the guardian. The guardian is in charge of which house I'm sent to, right? And I think there was a time when the guardian felt that she could save more money by having two kids live in the same household instead of each, because then you would be getting money from both of the parents, but you would only be paying one house.
Right.
So that's my understanding now that I look back at it. I didn't know that was the reason behind it back then. But so due to that reason, she said that I will be moving from my first homestay family to my second homestay family. And then I would live with another girl. And I knew that girl and we're fine. So, okay. But then I wasn't sure why. Why do I have to move to a different family? I wasn't sure, but she told me so. I was like, okay. So when should I pack? When am I moving? And then she would say, don't tell this to your family. We will tell them. We're the adults. We'll take care of it. So don't talk about this with your homestay family now. But go home. And these are some trash bags that you can use. Stuff all of your things in this trash bag and be ready to leave tomorrow after school. So and then she was like, don't tell this to your family. So I didn't know why, but I was like, okay. So I went home and in the trash bag, I stuffed all of my things in. It was like I was trying to smuggle somewhere, like be an illegal immigrant or something.
Yeah.
So I had all these things packed, and in the morning I would go to school. And then apparently the way they handled it was so poorly done that it was almost as if my guardian had went up to my homestay dad at his work. That's where my guardian found him, and then just told him that, yo, this girl's gonna live in your house today, and you've been a terrible homestay, whatever.
What?
And then really offended him somehow.
Wow.
So the family was very offended by.
And you had a good experience there with that family?
We were very good.
Yeah.
And then but then my guardian offended the family. So the mother got super angry. So she came to my school when I was leaving school.
Oh, wow.
And then she would grab me and say, how could you do this to me? Like, I went to your room and you have these trash bags with all of your stuff in it. Like, you were just going to lie and just leave. Like, and then, so she was very angry.
Yeah.
And then I was like,
trying to explain yourself in with 6 months of English language under your belt.
Yeah, exactly. So that was the first move, which was very poorly done. And then I went to my second house. But we resolved things much later on. So I ended up not working with that guardian anymore. I got a new guardian at the end. And then that's when I when I reconnected with the first homestay family, because a lot of their kids were still going to school with me. We would see each other on a daily basis. So it was very awkward, but then we would kind of still try to reconnect, and we had dinner together later on. So everything happy ending now. But at that time, the first move was not a good experience. And the second one was when I was living with an old couple, and the couple, the father and the mother, I will call them. So the mother, she was a challenged person. She was depressed, and so the father would take care of me and the other girl that we were living together with. But that father fell ill one day, so he was sent to the hospital. So and that day, the mother, who was very depressed, was very angry that her husband had fallen ill, right? and she decided to take that upon us and started yelling at us.
Oh, wow.
Saying, go back to your country. And
Oh my gosh.
you little Asian, whatever, blah, blah. She would like be almost throwing things at me
Wow.
at the kitchen table.
And she was fine until that kind of happened.
Before that, she was just like a very depressed lady who would cry, so we wouldn't try to cross her. And it was mostly with the dad that we interacted with.
Yeah.
But after he fell ill, she was serving us really crappy food and saying, like, you're, like, go back.
Jeez.
So I called the police.
Oh my gosh.
Because I wanted to, no, I called the guardian.
Oh,
and
okay.
then the guardian called the police
Ah.
so that we could leave the house. So when the mother was out, I, again, in a trash bag, put a bunch of my stuff in. It was a pouring rainy day.
Yeah.
And then we were loading things in, and we called the police just so that we made sure that made sure that the guardian didn't break into the house for legal purposes, apparently. So, like, the police is standing here. I'm moving my things into the car in the rain. And then just when we were about to leave, the mother comes back. She's infuriated. She's yelling things. And then we just kind of run away. So,
wow.
There were a bunch of those things, yeah.
That is wild. And it's crazy to think that after multiple bouts of just like familial chaos, like you just decide, like, I'll stick around here, for the next handful of years.
Despite all that, I like school. I like essays. I like books, and I like doing this here. So yeah.
I want to check how we're doing on time. Okay, so we're still at an hour, and you don't have a cutoff, right? No. You'll be okay. Yeah. If we go for like another 30 minutes to 45 minutes. Cool. This is going great. Yeah. This is awesome.
I'm just babbling. Okay.
No, I find it very interesting.
Okay.
And I think one of the things I'm excited about is other people who have been following, like, even my own personal journey over the course of the last like 3 or 4 years. They're interested in like the people that I'm meeting and the conversations that I'm having. So I think they'll find it interesting as well. I guess when it comes to living in Canada versus, because you were it was Boston was the prep school, or where was the prep school?
It was 3 hours away from Boston. It was a very small town called East Hampton.
And did you feel like you got an American experience, or do you think it was very isolated because it was a prep school?
That is a very good question, because I don't know.
You don't have anything to compare it to?
Yeah, I don't know what the American experience is. So.
Were the student body, was it largely like U.S. folks?
Yeah.
Okay.
A lot more U.S. folks from all across the country. So because it's a prep school, I think maybe it was a bit more diverse than the peers you would meet at a public school, because then you come from that neighborhood, right?
Yep.
But the prep school, it was about 70-30 ratio of boarding students and 30% day students. So 30% would actually come from the neighborhood. I see. And I had a lot of day student friends. Okay. So I would do sleepovers at their houses. So maybe American.
Yeah. I guess like in terms of culturally, based on your the few years that you had spent in Canada and then when you went to the States, did you notice any differences really? Because I've never spent any time in Canada before, but I imagine that there's probably some like slight differences.
Yeah, I guess the little weird jokes that go between Canadians and Americans, like making fun of each other's ways of calling things.
Yes.
So I would say, "Where's the washroom?" and they'd be like, "Washroom? You mean the bathroom?"
That's funny. So mostly it would like be language oriented in terms of that.
But
stuff.
It wasn't a whole lot different. It was just kind of going back to the Korean heritage more, because it didn't really matter to them that I had studied in Canada. That didn't really matter to them because I look Korean. So like when they ask you where you're from, I just say I'm from Korea, and you don't really talk about where you lived across your life when you're a teenager. So that Canadian part just kind of passed by. But sometimes my first friends that I had in 9th grade would be like, "Why do you speak good English?" And then I'd say, "Oh, I lived in Canada before." And then they'd be like, "Oh,
I see." Interesting. And were other international students at the prep school as well?
Yeah.
And any from Korea or no?
Yes.
Ah,
So
okay.
about a total of maybe 12 Koreans in the entire prep school.
Okay.
So a very small group,
Uh-huh.
just one or two in each grade. So
I see.
it was, it was a very family-like group in
Ah, really?
that, it was, we took care of each other. And
So you got out of your mode of I'm not speaking
Yeah.
to any Koreans or associating with any Koreans while I'm in the U.S. That
Yeah.
was that was over. That
exactly.
chapter?
By then it was over.
Yeah.
And I actually found myself being able to help a lot of the other Koreans because some of them were coming here for the first time after having lived in Korea before.
Mm-hmm.
So some of them were not familiar with English. So I found myself in a position where I often would be helping the international students, and the school did a really good job of this diversity community where the older students, you would have a buddy system. It didn't really matter that you were Korean, but it's just like international students helping each other out. You would kind of match people so that you could help someone get accustomed to the ways here.
Yep.
So that was there. What was the question? Sorry.
No, just in terms of I guess the Koreans that live there
Yeah.
and whether you were friends with them or not.
Yeah.
Which you answered.
I was friends.
Yeah. But like even I guess the other Koreans that had the same kind of experience as you of like the Canada experience, for example, did a fair amount of them also make the same decision as you and decide to stick around? Or would you say the majority just like, all right, I'm done. Now I go back to Korea?
Yeah, that's interesting because a lot of them actually did go back to Korea. And I was this odd one out who was still out there. So, and I guess part of it is because that was what was planned. The original purpose was for them to go back to Korea.
Right.
So I was the weird one saying I'm staying.
Yeah.
But also, unless you really study the language and try to get into the community, it doesn't naturally come to you.
Yep.
Like you have to work towards getting good at something. And for me, I worked very hard to pick up the language as fast as I could. But I feel that a lot of other friends that were with me in Canada, they were just sad that they were sent here by their parents to pick up a language. They wouldn't do any homework. They wouldn't participate in anything.
Yep.
So I'm a very pleaser type of person, teacher's pet type of person. I always like to get A's. I always want to be the first one in line.
Yeah.
So for me, it was hard to understand them. Like, why are you not? Why are you not trying your best?
Yeah.
So why don't you feel pressured? I feel pressured. So for me, I sometimes wouldn't get the kind of lack of excitement they had. But I guess it just wasn't a fit for them and not a good timing for them to be there.
Yep.
And feel bad. And then, so therefore, I feel like a lot of them came back to Korea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Well, I mean, I imagine that because I would classify myself as like very introverted.
Really?
And yeah. And so if I was like 10 or 11 years old and in a foreign country, I think my default would be to like kind of shy away from that. But like now that I'm in my 20s and I've had some abroad experiences, I know how important it is to like, you know, kind of put yourself out there, feel uncomfortable at times. Even now for me, like trying to learn a little bit of the Korean language and speak it is very difficult, especially because there are a lot of people out here that if you speak English to them, they can understand you and then, you know, respond in like in broken English or just in Korean, and then I can understand them a little bit. But yeah, it sounds pretty rare for somebody like you who at that young age, you both were like competitive to an extent with your own expectations of how you were going to progress, and you are naturally extroverted, right? Which I think is probably an advantage.
Yeah, at that
dimension
time
as well.
it really was.
Yeah. Interesting. And then I guess when you came back to Korea after you spent like, I guess it was just one semester at Northeastern, Was that experience like a difficult one just because you had adopted like very much of a kind of North American mindset, if you will, or how did you find that experience overall?
Uh, well, I think one of the darkest moments of my life was when when I was actually moving to Korea though, because, and that wasn't because of anything Korea or America related, but
Okay.
personally because the main reason why I was coming back to Korea was because I couldn't afford further education there. So just having that fact within you, saying that, just knowing that you could have done more, but now you are in a position where you have to come back. It just it felt like a setback, and then I guess that part of reapplying to colleges in Korea was a very lonely experience because I was basically doing that myself. So my parents didn't even know what colleges I was applying to. They just knew that I was trying to get into colleges here, but they kind of were busy with minding their own things. They
Sure.
had their own businesses. So I just had to take care of myself and look for colleges, look for these admission guidelines, and figure out the deadlines for which documents. Had to contact the high school again to get all of the transcripts and whatever. Not transcripts. What do you call them? Just documents. These documents mailed to Korea so I could send them to universities here.
Yep.
So just figuring out all that paperwork and suddenly feeling so responsible for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
I guess that was sort of very lonely. So and also just and because I had no friends here, so after moving back, I had no friends.
But
I had that group, the organization, the Project Teach.
Right.
But we only convene once a year for the winter break or summer break. And then they all go back to their schools. So all of the friends that I had met, they were back in their own universities. And I was still here trying, and I didn't belong anywhere. I had dropped out. I'm trying to get into a different college now, but at the moment I don't belong anywhere. And there's not like a regular friend group that I go to because all of my friends are from elementary school. So that was a lonely process just by just by how the environment was set up. But I learned to busy myself a lot by taking some fun K-pop dance courses.
Nice.
And then did a lot of tutoring, and because I was so sad that I couldn't have a part-time job in the States, I got a bunch of part-time jobs while I was here.
Nice.
And then finally I'm earning money. Finally I'm making at least something.
Yeah.
So just doing these little things to occupy myself while I was here kind of helped me get through it. And then also the Project Teach helped me to have something to look forward to, because we have the summer camp coming, so we're going to prepare to promote the to get signups for the volunteers. So it was a lot of the preparation work for the next camp and the next camp that had me have something to look forward to. So I guess those were the kind of transitional periods when I was trying to find myself another home here.
And Project Teach was something that you had first gotten involved in when you came back to Korea?
Yeah.
Okay. And then when you were applying to colleges, was it only colleges in Korea, primarily like Seoul based?
Yes.
Okay. And what was the thought process in terms of applying to colleges? Like, I guess, was it obvious to you which ones to apply to and which ones not to?
I guess there were not many options, because not every school has these options for foreign high school graduates to apply. And there are only certain majors that you can apply. So it was mostly English major or international studies major. So I didn't have a lot of choice as to what kind of majors I could apply. But the one that I ended up getting into was the most diverse one of them all, because they have tried to have the liberal arts. So you don't choose your major in your first year. They have a lot of these weird courses. My major is culture design management. We call it CDM. Another course is creative technology management. There's another course called justice civil leadership. It's wild, it's weird, but it was an array of majors that I could still have with the condition that I had. So I was just kind of choosing from the little options I had, and at the moment it was the only way forward for me because I couldn't afford college in the States. So I'm definitely going to apply to a Korean college. And I don't even know where I stand in the spectrum of GPAs or whatever because I wasn't in the standard school system. So I don't know which is like to my level, you know? So, but it happened that I wasn't so low. So I'm glad I studied a lot in high school. So it helped me and therefore was able to get into a satisfying, I don't know if I can say that, but I'm glad I got into a place where I could finally belong to. I was just really happy to get into one. You can only apply to 6 colleges for early decision or whatever. And and that's the only thing I could do because I can't take the standardized test in Korea. So I can't apply for the regular. So I had to go for early decision. And you only have 6 colleges that you can apply to.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I see. Okay. And then I before we end up coming on time, I do want to get a little bit to the EO chapter as well, just in terms of like the whole startup ecosystem, like how you found EO, where you had mentioned that you took a kind of like startup related class at Northeastern, which first got you like, I guess, excited or interested in entrepreneurship. But the whole interest in startups in general, even throughout your 4 years in college, and then your start to EO, can you, I guess, like summarize how that transpired?
Right. Oh, it's my favorite thing to talk about.
Amazing. All right. I'm glad we're getting to it.
Right. So yeah, I took that course and how should I begin? But one of the small hopes I had when I was entering colleges in Korea was that maybe there's more I can do here than I could have done in the States. In terms of entrepreneurship, because in the States, as I mentioned, I couldn't work, I couldn't make money, and so I felt very strapped down with all of these policies. But in Korea, if I go to a college here, I'd be just this normal student, just like everyone else, and I would enjoy all of the benefits of being a Korean at a Korean university. So that excited me to think about doing a social enterprise in Korea, because the seminar that I took at Northeastern, we focused a lot on social social enterprises that were based in South Africa or India or Bangladesh. It was these developing countries and ways of and how the businesses there could disrupt the ecosystem. But not a lot of them talked about how what we consider as developed countries could still benefit from the power of social entrepreneurship. So even in a developed country, let's call Korea a developed country, there's still so much inequality. There are so many problems in the society that still need to be fixed.
Right.
And I felt that it was less focused on at that time. So maybe if I go to Korea, one pathway for me is to find a way how social entrepreneurship could be applied to a country like Korea. That was sort of my small hope of a way forward. So it was just at the back of my mind. Maybe there's a way for me to be able to do that. And then, so when I entered Yonsei University as a first-year student, I found out about this student club. It's called Enactus, and it's kind of this global network of a bunch of students in a lot of different universities coming up with their own business ideas to solve local problems. And they have a chapter in Korea too, and also around 26 different universities in Korea. And there was one at Yonsei University. And the project that I came across was this project where students were trying to revive the local economy near Cheonggyecheon, which is this stream that runs right across Jongno. And then there are a lot of these very old bookshops, very old vintage bookshops that were dying out. And the students decided we could actually put a marketing spin on all of these old bookshops and have this packaged good called 설레어함. It's like a gift box, a mystery gift box that the shop owners would curate which books would go in them, and then you would be kind of blindly buying a book by trusting the shop owner on their taste at books, and then you'd be like gifting each other.
Cool.
So it was a very cute idea.
Yeah.
And then the packaging was really cute, and just learning and seeing it was discovery. This is a Korean club that's helping local industry by ideas on entrepreneurship and making impact. So, I'm going to join this club and I'm going to do something like this. So throughout college years, I did a lot of different things, but that was my main focus. This is what I would do. So I joined the club, and then I worked on a similar project, but for a different local economy. I worked with print shops, a very old vintage print shops in Incheon area, where a lot of the people were losing jobs because of these first of all, the lack of need for printing these days and so on. And then we would work with artists to come up with these products that we can sell online that truly harnesses all of the techniques that only these print shops makers can implement in the product. So you can't just make it at a factory. It has to be them to make it to that much good quality.
Sure.
So we would create those kind of products and try to sell it.
Wow.
So that project was really, really fun. It was very, very pressuring, and then hard to do as a student. And also with a bunch of students having different ideas, it's hard to do teamwork.
Yes.
But we had a lot of fun. So sorry, I'm talking too much.
No. This was the team was a subset of people that were part of the Enactus group at Yonsei?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we would have cohorts. So I was a spring cohort. I was a 34th cohort. And there were about 20 of us. And then we would be divided into 4 to 5 groups. And then we would start a project. And what I loved about Enactus was that you don't just start a project, do it for how long ever you do it, and quit. It carries on. So as long as the project is good and it's sustainable, that team lives on even after you leave. So you get to recruit your next teammates and then train them, onboard them.
That's cool.
And then tell them about the mission.
Yep.
And then you get to leave, and they get to then carry on the rest of the project. So I loved that idea of doing something for the sake of experience, and then we're done, and then just get out. Like, we're actually trying to build a real relationship with the people that we were working with in the local economies. So that was this piece of authenticity that I felt a lot of entrepreneurial clubs lack in student clubs.
Yep.
Like, they always try to, work on this project, like, you make this much money, my portfolio, but then I feel like it doesn't really solve the problem. They just kind of make it look like they have entrepreneurial skills, and then there's your resume, and then it just gets gone.
Yeah.
So I didn't like that about these clubs, but Enactus was much more authentic in the way we approach these projects and the problems. So yeah.
And Enactus is still a lively thing today at all these universities.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Check it out. It's awesome.
Do any of the ideas from these Enactus teams ever hit the startup ecosystem and they decide, hey, we want to raise capital or something like that?
Yeah. Even in Korea, there are some cases where that has come true. So there was an idea, silent taxi. So this was an idea from university students in Dongguk University, and they were trying to create more jobs for deaf people. I don't know the better term for it. Sorry.
No, it's okay. Yeah, I wouldn't know a better term for it either. That makes sense.
So because deaf people usually have very limited choices as to what jobs they can have, but actually they can earn certifications to be taxi drivers, and they branded it so that it's like a call taxi service at an affordable cost, and then the deaf people would be the people driving the car, and
Yep.
then there would be there would be a screen set up so that you can interact with the driver without having to tap them on the shoulder and startle them. So, and then it got investment, and it's still running, up and running.
Wow.
And there's a few more of those that even in Korea that's come out of Enactus.
That's cool. Do you know who invested in the company? Was it like the government funded stuff or a combination of like venture capital?
Combination.
Yeah.
So there's not a whole lot, but there are these impact VCs in Korea as well. So like D3 Jubilee, Sopung Ventures, and Envisioning Partners, and so on. There's a number of those. So they would be most active investors in projects like these to
Got
actually
it.
help them become a company.
Okay, very cool. And so you're part of Enactus, I guess. Is it all 4 years at Yonsei?
No, it's as long as you do it, but I did it for a year and a half, which
Okay.
is longer than most. Most students only do it for a year, but
see.
I did it for a little longer.
Okay. And then that's, I guess, in terms of connecting the dots between how you got your starts at EO, was it the first job out of graduating?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it was the reason why I learned of EO was through Enactus, because we were trying to teach ourselves how to do a startup, right? Basically. And we would try to find these online resources. And I'm not a YouTube person, so I don't watch a whole lot of YouTube. I don't watch I don't really watch YouTube.
That's probably a good thing in terms of your time management.
I think so. But EO was the only channel that I would watch because it was so inspirational. It would teach you about the startup mindset. It has all these stories of these founders starting out with nothing and the challenges they had, and suddenly being able to solve the problem. I loved the storytelling. So whenever I was eating, I would just turn on EO, and that's like my thing for all of my lunch times.
That's awesome.
So I was an avid subscriber.
Yeah.
And then after I completed the year and a half at Enactus, I was thinking, I only have 1 semester left until I have to graduate. So I'm going to take a break, and I want to try working at a startup because I really liked the experience before of trying to do a startup.
Yep.
So why don't I go to an actual startup and get work experience there? So I was looking for an internship, and EO happened to be hiring at that time. And I looked into different roles at different companies. So because of my major and the things I like to do, I like to design, I like to write. So I thought marketing would be a good path. So I was looking into these digital marketing internships in different companies, but none of them resonated because it seemed that, okay, you're selling this product, but if more people buy this product, what changes? It didn't resonate. Like, if more people buy this coffee instead of that coffee, what changes? It didn't click. So I wasn't excited to apply to any of these jobs out there. But EO had this role of live streaming producer open for internship. And I knew nothing about live streaming, but I knew EO. And because it's an internship, it's probably okay that I know nothing about live streaming.
Yeah.
They'll teach me, right? So I decided to apply because I love the content that they make. So I applied without knowing anything about live streaming. I went into the interview, told them I know nothing, but how I love their content and how I want to experience working here, and that I could be a fast learner. Just said it. I wasn't sure if I could be, but I just said it. Hopefully. And then I got the job, thankfully. So, and I was only supposed to be here for that 3-month internship, and then after that we were gonna see if there was a fit. And just within 2 months, Yoonhye, who was my boss at the time, she's our executive producer, she said, why don't you just join the company? And then I know you have 1 semester left, but if you're okay with juggling that with work,
oh wow,
you could still do it. And I was like, yes. I'll take online courses. I don't have to graduate with straight A's. I don't care anymore.
Yeah.
So I was very excited to join the company, and I just loved this role I had, which was at the time of doing a lot of demo days and working on different live streaming projects, events with different companies every time. So I knew nothing about how engineers work. But the first thing I did was write a list of questions that we had to ask engineers about their job so they can talk about it at some kind of talk concert that we were live streaming. So I would have to learn very quickly about what their job entails and then have it deduced into a nice list of questions. So in order to do that, I was learning a lot of new things every single week, depending on each company that I had to work with, and just loved the exposure to different worlds that I was getting every single day with the diversity of companies that we work with. So therefore, stayed longer and longer and longer and longer until now.
And the examples that you were giving of like these live streaming, I guess like projects or exercises, like what are an example of like, I guess what does that mean in terms of the live streaming projects?
Right. So it wasn't a thing until COVID, but before COVID, when companies were trying to hire in Korea, they would usually hold these these events where they explain which JDs are out there. I get, maybe it's a Korean thing, I'm not sure, but these Korean companies, they say, we're hiring, like it's a big announcement, we're hiring from this day until this day, and we're hiring these many engineers, these many marketers, these many QA people, blah blah. And then they would do an event where they have members of their team come up on stage, talk about what they do at work, and just kind of describe the whole hiring application process to onboard, to make people apply more so that you can source the best of talents. So we call it 채용 설명회, but I'll just call it like hiring event for now. So these events would usually take place offline, but with COVID, these companies suddenly didn't have the ability to hold offline events anymore. That makes sense. Right? Yep. So they had to live stream, but they have no YouTube channel and they don't have the audience online. So they will come to us because EO had a audience of, I think, 400K subscribers back then, and a lot of our subscribers are people working at startups, IT tech industry. A lot of engineers watch our content, so they would come to us because it's a good target. So then it would be kind of like a consulting production business where we talk to the hiring team and kind of learn about their objectives of this time's hiring, and then create a show where, okay, talk session 1, it's gonna be people working on this part of your product coming up, and then talking about how they collaborate, what they like about their company, how and what kind of skills you need to be able to work sufficiently here. So they would talk about these things.
I see. That makes a lot more sense. And so 3 years it's been, right, at EO for you, and you've also had like some pretty unique experiences where you've kind of been behind the scenes on some like high profile interviews that the company has done, right? And you have like done many trips back and forth, I guess, to the US and to other countries as well. I guess like overall, in terms of what you've learned from like those experiences of just having interactions with people who have like made it to some extent, like, do you have like some big insights or learnings or lessons there? Like what you knew before versus what you knew after? And if you don't have anything specific, that's totally okay as well. But I'm just curious because like even for myself, over the last 2 or 3 years, I've gotten exposure to a lot more like high profile people as well. And some of them I've actually had the opportunity to work closely with. And I think that maybe beforehand, there's always this imposter syndrome of like, you don't know enough, you haven't done enough, all of that stuff. But when you have like very human interactions with other people, it kind of breaks that barrier to some extent. And also it's just like surprising to realize that there are certain skill sets that work really well in certain environments. But for example, like sometimes it's hard for me to have conversations with people who are like very, very highly intellectual because they're so much in their head that their communication skills are lacking, right? And so they've been really successful at developing maybe it's their own startup within a deep tech space. But in terms of when it comes to like communicating their ideas, it's much tougher, right? And so I would have assumed beforehand maybe that like if it's a CEO or a founder of a company, they've got like all the skills and everything, right? But I think my mind has maybe opened a little bit of just like people are very different in terms of the expertise that they have, and also my own comfortability of being more sure of myself and having some confidence is the more conversations that you have with people who have accomplished really big and exciting things, the more you realize like how hard it is, but also the more at least I'm convinced that I can do hard things as well. So I don't know if there's anything in terms of life lessons for you that you've learned. You're still early on, but you've had the opportunity to whether it's not like directly interview, at least like be a part of many of those big experiences with the company, right?
Right. Oh, wow. Thank you for sharing so much.
Sure.
I was thinking, I think personally, what I learned from the people that I was able to interact with or be exposed to at least was, I think it has been a very liberating experience to encounter so many different forms a life can take. So some cases. So there was this one startup that we interviewed. It's called Clo Virtual Fashion, and they're building this 3D clothing software where you design clothes with it. It's a 3D design tool, and it's like the Adobe for all the fashion people. And when we were doing a documentary on them, I conducted a few of their interviews, and then what was interesting about them is one of the co-founders is what used to be an investor before, and he as an investor wanted to invest in the founder, but their VC, the company he was with, wouldn't allow him. So he wanted to invest, but he didn't actually get to give out the term sheet because the company was against it. But he was so invested in this company that he quit being a VC and became a co-founder.
Crazy.
And started doing sales for them.
Wow.
And so you can choose to do that. And I think that was one of the many cases I saw where you think you're on some trajectory in your life and you have this idea of how your life is going to play out. And the more eager you are, maybe the more clearly you have set it out for you. Because you want your life to be special. So you have all these things that you want to have in there. Oh, I have to have kids. I want to have this. I want to have this. And by then I will have this. You think about all these things because your life is so dear to you. But that sometimes confines you to that. But if you're so sure of something, if you want something so much, you can quit that and become a co-founder when you were an investor before. I think just this courage these individuals have had to quickly give up whatever ideas they had to pursue what they want and to know to pursue it is what makes them great. And like sometimes people ask you, oh, what's the common thing of all the great founders that you've met? There's no common thing because they're so different. But the common thing is that they keep to their differences and they don't quit. So many people, there are so many reasons your thing can go wrong, but it's just at the end of the day, all these different weird evolution that they have gone through in their life, the final form that they're in, it only exists because they pursued with it. And so I think it's just kind of, it was a liberating thought for me because there's so many ways in which you can pursue your life and be great. There are so many different greats that there are. So I guess that's one of my biggest sort of takeaways from working at EO is that you get to experience so many of these and feel confident about yourself too for being lost sometimes because you're on a way to whatever it may lead to. And if I put my mind to it, then it'll lead to something great. You should
definitely be the PR like spokesperson for EO because that was very well said. But that's amazing. I'm also curious, like in terms of the Seoul startup scene, and I guess like the amount of innovation or interesting ideas, or the amount of just ambition within like the youth of how much there is there, and also like in terms of both on the positive side of like good things that you're excited about in Korea, and also things that where it's like I wish more of X, Y, or Z would happen to start to, I guess, amplify whether it's community or ambition or any of that stuff. Like what your observations are there, especially as you compare it to, you have spent some time in like the Bay Area, right? And obviously Silicon Valley is like a beast of its own. But I'm curious in terms of your overall reflections, and even if it's just observations of how things have evolved over the past few years.
I think so. I spent the last 3 months in the Bay Area from April to July. There were other 3 months before that, but we counted as okay, whatever. So so the last 3 months I spent in the Bay Area. It was a very shocking experience because the competition is so high, and we're all missing out on all of that here. And I felt deprived of all the competition that I could be in if I were to be in that environment versus in Korea. And that's coming from having worked at EO for 3 years in Korea. I was you get to work with a lot of VCs and a lot of big startups in Korea, especially when you're doing these live streamings or demo days. You work with a lot of them. And at a certain point, you know all of them. At a certain point, I don't know all of them yet, but at a certain point, very soon you will. And it's a very small community, and it's not very competitive because also it's very much because a lot of things are government funded. And a lot of them are number oriented, result oriented. So as long as you can get some kind of output, for now, it doesn't. I feel like a lot of programs are geared towards just the result paper, the report at the end of the day, at the end of the year. Like with these many demo days, we help these many startups. It's like that kind of seems to be the KPI for a lot of these programs. And so I feel the competition is not high in terms of driving for really sustainable growth. But I felt when I was in the Bay Area, one of the most shocking things was just how many people are trying to create a community of their own and a network of their own, how fiercely and how diligently they execute. So there are so many of these happy hours and these and these, and this is all an effort to stand out in this huge competition. And building the network is so important over there. But here, you'd be surprised how little events we have and how less we do to stand out because we don't have to. And I feel like, and I felt very deprived when I went there because I have never experienced such high standard for everything. And I think we should all be exposed to that because the Korea has to venture abroad. Korean startups has to venture abroad, and also foreigners must be able to come to Korea more easily than how it is right now if we are to survive as a country, because we have an aging population and very small, aging, decreasing population. And we're not gonna just stay the same as healthy as we are now if we just keep to our ways right now. And so many startup founders building within the Korea ecosystem are building things just for the Korean market, and that's only because they understand this market only, and everything is in Korean, and they don't want to network in English. Like that's the reason. English. I never studied English, so global. I'm not sure. Maybe I will hire someone else to do global later, but not now. So that's what I would hear a lot, but. You have to, or else if the competitors come in, your thing is just
toast.
Yeah. So it's so easy to lose power when you're trying to be within this nice protection, because that will be gone very quickly.
Right.
Is sort of the fear I have for us. And hopefully, so actually Taeyong and I have been working to build more events here that's more cross-cultural. I think the entire Korean Ministry of Foreign, like all of them are also trying that because they feel the same needs, but haven't been so successful yet. And one of the biggest things has been language barrier.
Yep.
And we really have to work against it. So.
Yeah, that's a great summary. And I ask and am curious as well because, like even for you with your own personal development, it was like you felt that you needed to put yourself in an environment that felt foreign and that like kind of prodded you to move forward and evolve and develop, right? And I think it's a little bit tough and sad for a lot of Korean people who have owned, like this is their entire world, is the Korean ecosystem. And it's almost like if you live so long in that kind of sheltered environment, it becomes harder and harder to kind of break out of your shell to some extent. But at the same time, like Korea needs it now more than ever, right? And so it's like, it seems like it is potentially both a bottom up and top down issue. Like top down from the respective, you were describing some of like the approach that the VCs have of it's kind of a check the box, you know, this and this and this happens. Okay, we're good to move forward. It's not like anything like crazy change or ambition, right? And then from a bottom up perspective, I wonder, and over the course of the next 3-4 months of me interacting with more people, hopefully I'll get a sense for this, is the amount of like hunger and ambition and like idea generation that's happening with the young people here. Because right now it seems like there is a lot of improvement that needs to be had, both from a top down perspective, but also from a bottom up perspective. And so, you know, anything that, you know, whether it's podcasting or just community building is like, I also want to contribute to that in some way. So it's helpful for me to hear your perspective on that overall as well.
Yeah. I think when we say young people, for now, if we just focus on people in the early 20s, like people in colleges, it's an interesting divide because a lot of them are preferring to enter big conglomerates more than ever, but then at the same time there are all these college students also wanting to start their own startups. There's nothing like really in between, and it feels that you're either a big corporate guy or you're the startup guy. And then I feel a lot of people have kind of unlocked that secret to having your own media. Like a lot of people have started writing their own newsletters and started monetizing their own newsletters, building podcasts and YouTube channels, their blogs. That's become a very popular thing among even the first, second, third grade college students. And I'm also excited to see that happening. And they build their own conferences and have VCs mentor them. It's a great thing to see.
Yeah,
so
amazing.
There's a few of them that are happening very actively. Big student organizations that are trying to build products by themselves and teach themselves how to do things. So
that's great. Yeah, and I think that's the key, right? Is if you can find those one or two or handful of people that are very ambitious, you want to pour the fuel on that fire as quickly as possible, right? Because if they start to lose that, then that is like potential energy in the future that like Korea is losing out on, right? So
we need to capture them and then help them translate to something so that it doesn't die out as just a youthful passion. It has to translate to something. They need to be able to build outcome out of it so that it's sustainable.
Yes. Well said. Well, I know we're going to be coming up on time here soon, but I'm very grateful that you were willing to do the podcast. It's crazy that only 2 weeks into my Seoul adventures, I was able to find some people that are like have a lot of energy and passion and all of that for like everything Seoul startup related. So thank you for joining.
Thank you. It's so much fun.
Amazing. We'll have to hopefully do it again at some
You're
point as well.
Much of a too good listener. You let me babble too much.
No, it was super interesting and fun. So I'm glad we made it happen. And you're also my first in-person interview in Seoul, so it's a accomplishment in its own right as well.
So honored.
All right, thanks, Hannah.